Chief Miles O'Brien plays the cello. Dr. Beverly Crusher gave Captain Picard a recording of Data's violin performance. And Counselor Troy gives us a lesson in language. Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Seventh Rule with Cirroc Lofton.
Hello, hello.
My name is Ryan T. Husk, and today we're doing a review of Star Trek The Next Generation, Season 3, Episode 2, The Ensigns of Command, directed by Cliff Bole, written by Melinda M. Snodgrass. This was September 30th, 1989. Where were you? What a coincidence. We have a very special guest today. It is writer Melinda M. Snodgrass. How are you today, Melinda?
I'm good. Thank you guys for having me back. I had so much fun last time, so I hope we have a good session this time too.
I'm excited.
I want to say, Melinda, right off top, so far, still till this date, your episode is the best episode I've seen of Next Generation thus far, the Measure of a Man. So that has maintained its top of the charts for the last several weeks. So. Months actually. So
yeah,
it's been awesome. I just wanted to make that clear. And then again, this episode is just so delightful, and we're going to get into it a little bit, but definitely want to compliment you on your writing style and how it kind of flows when you write. It feels so thoughtful.
Thank you. I appreciate that. But I have to say, what you saw on the screen was not the original script. It's very close. Ricky and Hans were very delicate, but that script caused like a huge eruption of problems on the show, and it's the only time I've ever been rewritten. I've never been rewritten on any show I've been on, except that one. And if folks are interested, my version of the script is on my website under Writings. So if you go to my website, melindasnodgrass.com, and go to Writings, you will see my version of the script. And I can get into why there were all of these issues. Because I can't say that I've ever actually sat and watched the entire thing since it was rewritten. And so I'll do my best to answer your questions, but yeah. And
well, the first question,
I got the idea and all the other things.
Yeah, well, the first question is because, to be honest, I think, and this can't be a coincidence because it seems like this is you consistently and you're writing consistently. It seems like you have the best grasp of characters' voices, and you have the best grasp of using characters that I believe, or we believe, is the proper usage for these characters. It fits, it works. It's not like somebody got an idea and dropped it into the Next Generation. It's as if you have a good idea and a good grasp of what these characters are like as people, and you know how to write for them. You want to stay true to the characters, and that's the most important thing in writing, I think. And you do that so well. So before we go into such
and let me add to that a little bit, just one more step. The opening of Measure of a Man had everyone playing cards, and that was the card game scene. And it gave us a day in the life of the crew. It made us feel like, oh, this is something non-war related or, science experiment related. This is just guys hanging out. This is what they do on their off downtime. And again, you started us off in this episode, and I wanted just to mention with the music and the violin and the cello and Mozart, again, giving us a slice in the life of this crew. And that's another pleasant. I hope that it's credit to you now because we're going to get into that, but it's another pleasant entryway. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's it's another just window into the day in the life of the Starfleet crew. And I love the way you introduce the episode that way. It just makes me feel like, oh, I'm along for the ride, and I'm seeing this friendship, kind of budding friendship between them, the camaraderie. So let me just make that point too.
Right.
Well, some of it is my love of, I grew up on the original show, and some of my fondest memories from childhood are the scenes in the rec room when Uhuru is singing and Spock is playing the harp, and Kirk was playing chess, or those moments of them just being people. Pardon me, and having a life.
Yeah.
And I wanted to bring that forward. I wanted to have a sense that I'm so sorry.
Not at all. So, and then
I wanted to have a sense of the people, so, and what they do when they're not on duty. So, and then that was a bit of a callback to those original Trek moments that I think a lot of us really treasure and cherish. So,
definitely.
Absolutely.
So, before we heap too much praise onto you, we would love to know what can we attribute to you before we heap too much praise onto any specific details. Can you tell us what was actually changed, what we saw that was not you?
Well, the major thing that happened is I'm going to mention someone who's the forgotten man of Trek, Michael Wagner. He was actually the showrunner for 6 weeks. And he's sort of gotten written out of the history. Michael was a lovely man, brilliant writer, and just, loves science, loves space. And he had been hired to replace Morris Hurley, and Michael and I became very, very close. He was just terrific and another very fine mentor for me. And what happened is that Michael was supposed to write the opening episode of season 3, and he was getting up to speed, and it's a lot of work being a showrunner. And it ended up that I finished Ensigns of Command before Michael was done with his script. And so then Michael was like, well, okay, we'll just have your script go first. Well, everybody was coming back, and Gene wanted to have a meeting with me about the outline. And what I wanted, what was sort of the genesis of the idea? I wanted to see, I always had this idea of doing a triptych about Data. The first one is he a person or property? The second one is Ensigns, which is he learns that command is something ephemeral, that it's not logical, that it has to do a lot with, who's the biggest, meanest, toughest guy who can force people to listen. And he has to find it in himself to logically reach the conclusion that he has to, bump chests with this other man, and so that's what I wanted to explore. And then the other idea I was thinking about was the movie Shane, which has this wonderful thing of the stranger who comes to town and the woman falls in love with him because he's so different, he's so unique. So, and then of course he leaves because that's Shane, and I wanted that quality. And so I'm in a meeting with Gene, and we're going over the outline, and Gene says, well, Data is fully functional in every way. So let them F word. And yeah. Let them
be free. Let them be free.
Yeah, let them.
Yeah, star K.
Yes.
I went, okay. I had not planned on that. It was more just she was going to have a crush on him. But so I went back upstairs to my office, and I walked into Ricky and Hans's office, and I started tearing my hair out, and I said, okay, how do I get a logical robot to go to bed with this woman? And so when you read my script, you will see how I did that. Each logical step as he analyzes the situation. Well, everybody freaked out. And Brent thought I was making Data emotional. I wasn't. Again, go look at my script, you'll see. And there was like this huge blow up over the script. And as a result of that, Michael Wagner quit. He walked off the show.
Wow.
Wow.
He said It was very kind of him. We lost Michael to a brain tumor a few years later. He died at a very young age, and it's a
in
tragedy.
1992.
Yeah, and Michael said, "This script is terrific. Just send it to the set and shoot it." And everybody was, having hysterics. And so as a result, he just said, "I can't deal with this." And he walked off the show. He quit. And if he told me, I think I might have quit with him, to be honest, because it was just so, so frustrating. So the upshot was that Ricky and Hans agreed to rewrite the script. Didn't work out quite the way they had hoped. They had thought they were going to get a lot more authority, but they didn't. And they rewrote the script, and they were as delicate as they could be, but that whole sequence went away. The thing I'd been told to do by Gene, I think, is gone. And so, that was how it happened. So it was a tumultuous time, as we say. And I learned a lot, and I'm glad I did the show, but it was the show had its issues, as everyone knows now. So that's what happened. And I actually ended up having a lot of fun writing that scene, because trying to click through how an AI would actually analyze the situation logically to then do something that would be so out of character for a robot, I thought was kind of fun. So I'll be curious to see what people think if they go and read my script. You can email me or message me, or I'm pretty easy to get in touch with. But yeah, I was proud of the script, and I think it worked sort of still, despite the rewrites. And of course, my legal training, I wanted to do something with treaties and issues of Picard dealing with the aliens and having to figure out how to, argue them down so they didn't just kill all the humans. So there's the backstory to what happened to Ensigns.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, that is very fascinating. I don't even know where to begin with that.
Right. Well, Cirroc, it feels like remnants of season 2, doesn't it? Because as Melinda's talking about how tumultuous the time was, it feels like, seasons 1 and 2 were nuts. Feels like it was just still settling out in the first half of season 3.
Yeah, Melinda, we saw, since we've last spoke with you, we saw this documentary called Chaos on the Bridge, which kind of outlines some of the tumultuous things that were going on towards the end of the second season, and how many people got fired throughout the show. And a lot of the turmoil was exposed during that documentary, which I thought William Shatner did a great job of digging the dirt and finding out a lot of stuff about. But
he's a great interviewer, by the way.
He's a great interviewer. He's fantastic. But some of the things that we got from that was that it was a power struggle going on behind the scenes, and this seems a little bit in accordance with that when you talk about Gene is telling you to do one thing, and I guess there's somewhere else you're hearing other things, and there's this, Michael is caught in the middle, Michael Wagner, and he's having to balance these opposing forces of power that are pulling for power, and he just couldn't deal with it anymore, which is, interesting to me, because you mentioned he's the showrunner, and you would think as the showrunner, he has final say on what goes at that time, but apparently that wasn't the case.
Michael declared after a meeting with certain individuals that he considered this place a snake pit, and he walked out. So and then luckily we got Ira, and Ira tried very, very hard to protect us. And I'm I'm eternally grateful to him. I learned so much from him, but I'm also very grateful to him because he did shield the writers as much as possible in that craziness. So
it's amazing.
But, yeah.
Well, let me tell you though, watching this episode, I did not get a sense of that. I will say, full disclosure, the scenes, the kissing and all that felt a little peculiar to me. I wasn't really sure how to take it, but yeah, there is, obviously precedent with Data acting, going with his impulses. But beyond that, I thought this was a very good episode. I felt like, again, there was a use for all of the characters, and it was the correct use. We've been introduced to these characters that have special abilities, but a lot of episodes don't really demonstrate this, or it mixes them, it conflates, characters, or somebody doesn't act the way we would expect them to. And if they're changing the direction of a character, that's fine, but it needs to work. And this episode felt like every character was useful. It all made sense. It all
especially
was,
Troy. Counselor Troy's had the most difficulty being written. They're not having a good time writing for Deanna Troy.
But this worked.
I thought this was really a good use of her skills, talking to Captain about how to communicate with this other, what is a non-humanoid life form. So I thought that was just perfect use. And then her not having the telepathic ability to read these particular life form, but you have to use other kinds of metrics in order to engage with them. Basically, the letter of the law, which is one of the themes in this episode. So yeah, I thought you used the characters exceptionally well, Melinda. I thought it was just Picard was done well. Riker just kind of overseeing things and checking in on things. I mean, my favorite scene was literally 20 seconds long, and it was
I know what you're gonna say. It's gonna be
what it
splendid.
Is,
Splendid. Is that the one? I know it.
It's Picard walks into the transporter room and says, something like, "How's everything going here?" And Geordi says, "Not as good as you expect." It's like it's not working.
Splendid. Carry
on. That's good. And then Wesley says, "This guy wants us to do the impossible," and he's like, "Yeah, well, that's the captain." That scene was so quick. It was like 15, 20 seconds, but it was so good. And, that's the kind of writing that you do. I find myself writing down your words. And that to me is another sign of good writing. And so when I'm actually writing down the words, I'm not saying what I think about something or taking notes, oh, nice dress or good hat or nice background. I'm actually writing the words that you wrote. I'm rewriting the words that you wrote. And I think that to me is, when I find myself doing that, for example, I'll give you an example. Excessive honesty can be disastrous, particularly in a commander. I thought that was just great advice that he was giving to Data. And then he says, knowing your limitations is one thing. Advertising them to a crew can damage your credibility as a leader. Another well-written kind of make you think about the lines of where to cross and where not to cross as in a leadership position. Something you referred to earlier about writing the story to express the levels of command and Data's thought process.
No, thank you. That's really kind of you. I mean, it's funny because there used to be a running joke on the show that, okay, what word is Melinda going to put in a script that's going to send the viewers to their dictionary this time? They hired a prose writer and a former lawyer, so they should have known what they were going to get. I love words. I mean, words to me are magical. I mean, finding and discovering a new word is like, catnip for me. And so, I had fun with that. And when you've got good actors, and I always felt like, Troy in particular, and to some degree, Crusher, there just wasn't, they didn't know how to dig into the women in a really good way. And I found that very frustrating as the only woman writer on the show. It was like, we need to do more with these characters other than Troy. Everybody's nurturing, and they were sort of stereotypical women in a nurturing role rather than being officers on a military vessel. And, and I know Jean would, rise up from the grave and go, it wasn't a military ship, but it was like a military ship. I like to try to give them more than what they normally got to work with,
Mm-hmm. Did you feel, Melinda, along those lines that did you without throwing stones, did you feel as though some of the characters, and you kind of touched on it a bit, were being underutilized or misutilized? And did that kind of, just to add to what you were saying, did that kind of give you almost a mission to highlight their what they could do, their talents, their abilities, or their ceilings, what they could attain?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, in particular, I mean, Riker is a classic example. I mean, that's why I was so happy when my Navy buddy told me that the first officer always prosecutes. It gave Riker something to do, other than be admiring of Picard, and refusing his own command, which always struck me as insane. I mean, there's no naval officer who wouldn't, crawl over broken glass to be in command of his own ship. And so, that was hard to work around. But, you understand it because you're balancing the fact the actor wants to keep working. You don't want to write him out of the show. And I love Jonathan. He's a fabulous human being. And to some degree, Geordi. I mean, he was stuck with a lot of technobabble. And so that to me was a waste of a very fine actor. Give them something more. And then, of course, the women, and in particular, Troy, because, nobody knew how to, if she was truly telepathic, then you don't have any drama, because if she can tell you exactly what they're thinking, you've got a problem. And so she ended up with this kind of everybody was mocking it because it was like, I sense they're upset. Well, yeah, they're shooting at us. And I just thought that was unfortunate. I'll tell another tale out of school. What the heck? There was one particular episode. I don't remember what the actual title was. We called it Hot. I think we called it Hot Fudge Troy, but I can't remember. Sure. And it was the one where the rich guy is trying to monetize a wormhole in space. Blah blah blah. And he's a bad guy, and Troy sees it, that he's a manipulator, he's a bad guy. And I wanted her, and everybody else thinks he's fabulous. It's Elon Musk, okay? I shouldn't say that, you'll get in trouble. And so I wanted Troy, she pushes deliberately, because she's a trained psychologist, she pushes his buttons until he blows up at her, and the rage comes out. And he hits her. And all the men lost their mind when I suggested this. And I said, she's doing it deliberately because she's proving to the rest of the people, this is a bad guy and we need to back off. And she's using her skills to do it. And it doesn't make her weak, it makes her strong.
Yeah.
And they were like, no, you can't do that. So we weren't able to do that. And I would love to have written that for Marina. I mean,
I would have loved to seen that. Yeah.
She would have acted the shit out of that.
Because she knows how to push your buttons.
Yeah.
If there's one thing Marina is an expert at, it's pushing buttons. So I want to see her doing that in a scene.
Yeah, she pushes him, and then he hits her, and then she just looks at him, and then she looks at everybody else and goes, did I make my point?
Yeah. Point proven.
I just really wanted to write that scene, and instead the women always ended up being so very soft and so very nurturing and supportive. And, and part of that problem was that we weren't allowed to have conflict between the crew. We had to have external conflict because Gene's dictate was that my people are perfect, they have no flaws, they all love each other, blah blah blah. And so there was no tension, there was no people rubbing against each other and getting to explicate their characters in really interesting ways. So
that limits your storytelling ability and the drama that you can really bring to the table.
Right.
Real quick, that was
Yeah.
something that they did use in Deep Space Nine a few years later. There was a moment, it was a courtroom drama type episode, and there was a Klingon attorney that was trying to prove that Worf was bad and violent. And so he pushed Worf's buttons until Worf finally struck him in the courtroom. And I wonder, is that a coincidence? Or is that like, that's a good idea. We can't use it with a lady, but let's see if we can just put a pin in that for now. So it's just interesting to hear you say that. But
that's I did well because I never watched Deep Space Nine, not because not just because I can't do Trek, but I was part of those discussions. So of my saying, look, let's have Troy do this, and I wonder if that's really interesting. Thank you for telling me that.
Well, something to bring up, and I have another Deep Space Nine reference to add to that, and that is basically one of the themes of this story had me questioning, what is the right thing to do in this moment? Do the colonists have a right to be there and assert their, them being there, or so I was trying to see, find myself in if I was the jury or judge trying to looking over this case to see, who is right. Obviously, the guy who plays the villain or the colonist villain in this episode, he plays it in a way where you can't even side with him because he looks like the mean, the bad guy in the movie. So it's hard to gain, favor with him, which would be good because I would like to hear him more from the point of view of maybe I can agree with him, maybe he's agreeable. But he didn't play it that way. But nonetheless, the idea of whether people should surrender to an imminent defeat has been recycled in Deep Space Nine when the Federation was facing the Dominion. One of our characters, I believe it was Dr. Bashir, if I'm not mistaken, but was making the calculations that it would be impossible to, it was Dr. Bashir with some other artificially intelligent kind of hybrid beings and friends, yes, making the calculation that they were facing insurmountable odds against the Dominion and the Jem'Hadar, and that they must and should surrender based on all the calculations. There was no possibility of winning. And that theme seemed to be one of the undercurrents of this episode, was that these colonists were facing insurmountable odds. Again, an AI, in data is the one that's giving them this information. So it seems like almost exactly like the Deep Space Nine kind of episode that I'm talking about. But unlike this episode, in Deep Space Nine, Sisko decided, or it was the decision of them to continue to fight and face those insurmountable odds, which is different, an ending that is different than this episode. Obviously, the colonists realize they're going to be defeated and there's no point in resistance. But similar parallels in those themes. I wanted to ask you, Melinda, you mentioned the legal aspect. The law, it's not a law, it's a treaty, Picard says. Is that something that actually has significance in the real world? Because it made me think, what is the law versus a treaty? I mean, I thought you have to respect a treaty almost like a law.
You do. I mean, I think I was having Picard, pushing back hard, but I mean, yeah, I mean, that's why I argued with Gene when he told me there were no lawyers in the 24th century. And I told him it didn't make any sense because, you have conflict of laws issue, you have contracts, you have family law, you have child custody cases, and you have treaties. And, that's all hashed out by diplomats and lawyers. So, yes, I was fudging a little bit there because Picard is desperately trying to find a way to stall them long enough to let Data hopefully get them to agree to leave. And so he was buying for time, making arguments, but finding when he finally finds the right the right key to unlock it with these people that are these creatures that are so legalistic. I wanted it because he's trying a lot of different things that don't work because you don't want characters to just. I mean, that's always been the problem with heroes is you want them to fail and then try again and succeed. If they just succeed all the time, it's not very interesting.
Right.
It doesn't tell us anything about how humans rise up against adversity.
Right. Adapting and problem solving. It did show us a problem solving skill set that the captain had. He delegates Data because Data, you're immune to this hypertonic radiation. I think it was called hyperonic. Because Data was an android, he was able to go and be the away team. That was a delegation immediately done by Picard. And then he starts to go through council with Riker, council with Geordi about fixing transporters and figuring a way to get through the radiation block and transporting. These are all signs of leadership. I thought that you use Picard also in his best way.
Well.
I think that. Yeah, you're showing his leadership. He's delegating. He gave Riker a certain assignment of, looking after things, and he was engaged with Troy about how to deal with these alien, the Sheliak. And so, yeah, you mentioned not having seen the episode because I really wanted to ask you if you were pleased with the way the Sheliak visually came out, or did you have what was the written kind of description of what the Sheliak would be?
That actually was pretty much what I wanted. I didn't want anything that, where it was, I wanted it to be weird and very inhuman. And I can't remember exactly what I wrote, but I thought that worked. I thought that worked quite well. That I was pleased with how the creative decisions that went behind that. I really liked it. And back on Picard being, what I wanted was again that echoing. You've got Data struggling to command, and you've got Picard who does it so effortlessly. And so that there was something happening that was echoing each other, in the story. I mean that's why I love to write so much, is that it's those moments of pulling threads and making them echo and speak and have a conversation with themselves, with each other, that I truly enjoy. I mean, I think is one reason, I'll talk about a different show, but why I thought the second season and the ending of Loki was so brilliant and so perfect, because you could see it from season one. It was all there. All the foreshadowing was there. And I love that kind of thing. And, when you get an opportunity to do it, and this was a script where I could have, the juxtaposition of Picard and Data as Data struggles, to figure out how to do this.
Can you go elaborating a little bit on the third part? You mentioned Measure of a Man was about Data's rights as an android, whether he was have this kind of civil rights, and then this Ensign of Command was, about him learning commanding and what it takes to be somebody who leads well. What was the third part of that?
I never got to write it.
Oh,
I always wanted to write this. I wanted to write the episode, and they sort of let some of it. I wanted to write an episode where Data has to premeditate and commit murder.
Oh.
Wow.
Against all of his programming and
Mhm.
how he would get there. For a good cause. I mean, it's like some people just need to die.
Very good.
Yeah.
I really wanted to write that episode, and I never got a chance. A small part of that was sort of hinted at in The Most Choice, that was written by a young intern, and they hinted at it at the end of that episode, but it wasn't what I really wanted to do. So,
Sherry
Wow,
Goodharts
premeditated.
wrote that one. It sounds like. Melinda, I know you got to run in just a second here, but before you do, there was one question I had, and feel free to say no. But this theme, this idea of, if to me, when in that first half, it felt a little bit like Greek mythology or an old fable of a leader that led his people to death by refusing to leave a home. Was there any, it just felt like there was some kind of theme, in some kind of historical story. Was there anything that you got that from, or did it just come up organically?
Well, I was a history major before I went to law school. History and music were my two majors. I think some of it comes out of, we're watching it now. And the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, Israel, this sense of place, and this is our home, and now we're being pushed out of it. I think there are historical echoes all the way through of things where that has occurred. And like I said, I think we're seeing it right now, tragically, in what's happening in the Middle East. And so I think that's where that was coming from for me, is people that I wanted Data up against something that wasn't logically understandable to him. This sense of place, this is home, this is where I belong. That would be alien concepts to him. He can't really process that as an emotion. And so what I wanted was that he had to mimic emotionalism in order to win the fight, win the battle with Goshevin. And so that was sort of what was sitting in the back of my mind. A lot of, we're all standing on the shoulders of other writers, and we're all playing with themes, and we're exchanging information across time. And, whether it was Shane or, issues of law and these issues of colonization and losing one's sense of place, all of those things were playing into what I wanted to write about. So
amazing. Well, we loved it.
I have a last final one. Goshevin. Is there any anything there with the Goshevin as the name?
No, I was just trying to come up with a name.
Okay, all right.
I thought the same though, Cirroc. I was like, well, this sounds like a different kind of name. Usually it sounds very Star Trek. I was like, oh, this sounds like it's off the beaten path a bit for us. Well, Melinda, this has been such a treat. Again, we truly appreciate what you have contributed to the Star Trek universe, as well as our fun show. The things that the seeds you planted continue to grow and echo throughout Star Trek history 30 years later. It's freaking incredible. We really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for hanging out with us.
Thank you for having me. I love talking with you guys. Take care and have a great holiday.
Thank you.
And make sure everybody to check out her website.
Yes.
Brian?
Oh,
yes.
And also, real quick, you got space opera books that are available right now. Can you tell everybody about that very quickly? Good memory, Cirroc.
It's called the Imperial Saga. There are 5 volumes. The series is done, so you'll get the entire story. First book is The High Ground, and the final book is the Thucydides Trap. And they're all available on Amazon and Kobo, and I think they'll soon be available on Barnes and Noble. And I have the cover art is by a brilliant, brilliant science fiction artist, Elizabeth Leggett. I want to give her a call out because she's amazing. And so I hope you'll check out my novels too. And hopefully next time we talk, I'll have some news on a TV show I'm developing. So,
oh boy, can't wait for that. So everybody stick around. Melinda, we truly appreciate you. We'll have all that information, everybody, in the comment section below and in the description box below. So check that out. Stick around, everybody. We'll be right back on the 7th Rule.